This chapter is on where do our technologies come from. And it is a really good chapter. You remember the old joke? In fact, I had to ask AI to regenerate it for me because I couldn't remember it exactly. But it goes like the scientist says, hey, it's no big deal. I can make a rose. I mean, it's easy. God says, okay. Tell me how you're going to do it. He says, well, first I get some dirt. And he goes, get your own dirt. So the gist of this chapter is basically saying where our technology comes from. I mean, it is all from God. Everything is from God. And he has made these resources available, the minerals in the ground that are mined to, the nitrogen in the air that makes plants grow. Everything has been put together at this point in time for our benefit, for technology. And as we talked about last time, it's a kind of this way to get back to Genesis, which is that perfect walking with God and not worrying about anything and just, being together and, having that situation. Yeah, Woodstock. That's right. You baby boomer, you. All the way back to God. So we'll follow this, but this is any tangents, anything you guys want to contribute to the discussion is just absolutely fine. At any time. Technology is humanity's God-given capacity to reshape the created world for human flourishing. That's a nice definition. I have never heard that one. God's relationship to technology, God is sovereign over all technology, even the tools of those who don't acknowledge him. I was thinking of, Carl Sagan and what's the other guy's name? Hawkins, yeah, another brilliant people, but their pretext is that we can know the mind of God and we can achieve these great things and we don't need God to do them. But it's a get your own dirt, kind of thing, which they're oblivious to. My sister and her husband are Mormons, and well, she's terminally ill. We don't know how much time she has, but it's not immediate. But so anyway. We've stepped up the urgency of trying to reason with them about the Mormon faith. But one of the things that they believe, which is ridiculous, is that there's many gods. That we will, if we do well. The idea that there's many gods is itself the supposition is that God works inside of time constraints, right? That God has a father and that God has a father and that God has a father and there's generations of gods, but that would be a time thing, right?
It goes on forever.
And God, by definition, is outside of space and time. He's not constrained by time. There can only be one in that sense, because everything else is within the time constraint, which is also a gift from God. Everything is a gift from God. If we could adopt that attitude and understand that every breath and every beat of our hearts and every minute that we have is all a gift. We don't earn that. We all just get that. From who? From our creator. That is it. So that's where our technologies come from. We're tracing the origin of human innovation all the way back to God. Yeah. And this is the joke. I guess here it is. We figured it out. We can now create life from scratch. We don't need God anymore. God smiles, says, is that so? Why don't you show me? The scientist bends down and scoops up a handful of dirt. God taps him on the shoulder. Get your own dirt. Every good gift and every perfect gift is from above, coming down from the Father of love, creation or shadow due to change. And that is a point throughout the whole book, is that God uses everyone and everything.
And all to emphasize that those at the leading edge are God rejectors, but it's for the benefit of those who accept God.
Isn't that a good thing?
I guess it's good.
Of course it is.
Why
I mean, and it
as
doesn't
long
have
as
to
we're
make sense to us, but
as long as you're not using the technology in the way that it's a benefit to us, as long as you're not using the technology in the way that the God rejectors would want you to use it as they desire to use it, spiritually speaking.
right.
I think
That's kind of what I think is missing from the discussion in the book. But yeah.
there's an overarching statement, right? The subtext is the inventor and the scientist tend to lean into creating something from what already exists. And scientists and creators sometimes reject that God is in it because they think they're creating the rose, but they didn't create the dirt, right? Mm-hmm. And I think the overarching statement is scientists tend to believe in science and they advance scientific things to the world, and believers benefit even though they're non-believers because science is pushing that stuff forward. Mm-hmm. Maybe the statement is, in general, scientists don't believe in God, and therefore their inventions benefit those of us who do.
I mean, I have read his arguments, so I can't refute exactly what he's saying, but I don't know if I can agree with that statement because I think science it means theos, means just to know. It's the original intent of science is to know God, right? To study his intent. We'll never understand him fully. And so that's the pursuit. It's like you want to like abide in God and understand his glory. This is so prevalent. So to me, I think there are a lot of scientists who are leaning into it because they're like, they reject God and I'm going to find hypothesis where it all makes sense. In my opinion, when you seek truth, you're going to wind up finding out. It's going to lead you there. So right. I don't know if I would agree with the hypothesis 100%. I would say that probably a lot of times there's a lot of people who say, I'm taking control and I'm going to do this because I want control. That's what we did in the garden. We're like, oh, he's not a good friend, right? Like, Satan planted a doubt. Oh, he doesn't want good for me. Right. I need to take control of the situation and work it for my own good.
I think his example, though, somebody like Steve Jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. Not necessarily an atheist, but a believer of some other form. And people like Steve Jobs and Stephen Hawking and
tech giants, right?
Whoever, the giants that move technology forward in a big way, I think traditionally have been atheists. I'm guessing that might be what's driving his opinion. I don't know that for sure. But in this technology part of the book, where he's talking about how technology advances and then benefits the church, mm-hmm. I mean, all of this is relevant, but in particular, this is, a powerful example of that, and the person who pulled together 5 or 6 different things that existed into one, right? Like, I think that's his point, which is...
Yeah, that's a great example because that device can be used for both. Oh, right, because any idol that you have, of course, whether it's sexual temptation or whatever it is it plays that.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Yeah, science drifted off into thinking that we were the center of the earth, but you look at the Bible and it says it isn't the center of the universe, and then there's a flat earth. Science drifted off and saying it's a flat earth, but you look at the Bible, it's not flat. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of, if you study the Bible, you can bring science back on track.
Have you heard of the Discovery Institute? Yeah, they're doing some remarkable work. Leland had the pleasure of going out there, summer of your junior year?
It was almost 10 years ago in July. I went there. They did. So the Discovery Institute is it's, you can call it a think tank, I guess. But they do, they do research on intelligent design. It's not a Christian organization per se. I mean, they have associates like Stephen Meyer, who you might have seen through like Joe Rogan or some other podcast episodes. But Stephen Meyer is he a biologist? I forget exactly, but he's a Christian, and he has been he's been very prominent as someone who's articulating a case for intelligent design for the origins of the cosmos and of life. But but there are others within that organization who are more deist or you could say theistic agnostic. But yeah, they have a C.S. Lewis Institute there, or they had a seminar that was like, some people did like the hard sciences. I went and I was sitting among like PhDs and a bunch of people that I was not qualified to be around because they were like, they were many of them professors at colleges that were at least curious about ID, about intelligent design, and then there were some younger people like myself that were there that were part of the C.S. Lewis Institute, and we were focusing more on like philosophy of science, the humanities, like the influence of Enlightenment thinking on like the arts and understandings of theology, and basically the answer to that, sort of an apologetic against those understandings from a Christian perspective, ultimately. But yeah, that was like, wow. Yeah, that's 10 years ago. That's crazy.
Steve Meyer has a movie out right now, just released, Story of Everything, and it's playing at 2 local.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Isn't that a play on Stephen Hawking's book, A Story of Everything? Didn't he? I think it sounds like a response to that, which is really cool. I like that.
I love that. One thing though, if came to mind, that the friction that we get that from the non-believers, the pushback, like, is it not also a good thing to set us, in a more deliberately going to say, I'm going to show you that there must be a God, that it pushes us into, I want to engage with you. Let's talk together, and let's, given our God-given rationality and our own mind, which we cannot, that transcends AI, and reason, with those who are. It's like a Mars Hill thing. Let's reason together, and it does make us more intentional about, making disciples. Those who like, I once, was an atheist, but when I dove into it, I learned that I was wrong. It is that not the greatest witness when we see that happen.
His point in the book, though, is about how technology has advanced through all of this.
Yeah,
right.
It is,
and that foundational thing is absolute. It will only be advanced through this.
Right. Very good. And
great.
what would be wrong with that? Wouldn't that be cool?
It won't stay
You
on.
were saying something.
That could have its drawbacks.
Created AI. The revelation of scientists and this rub that's gone through time and so on, and the commander of the Artemis, which just circled the moon, who, as he proclaimed, he said, I'm not a religious person. And so after circling the moon and being out there looking back, he asked for a chapel.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
That was a great interview. I remember that.
Yeah.
Another was so moved. Wow. Yeah. And he just, so, you can see that when they got on the stage and there was the coverage from the news and everything, and there was 4 of them, and there was 2 of them or 3 of them, there was no denying faith or the discovery of looking back and going, wow, why is there something instead of nothing?
That's right. Why is there anything?
Anything.
Yeah.
Bang.
That's right.
From what?
From nothing.
That nice conversation. Like a lot of these guys are racing to get into space, right? So Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk, these guys all want to be like God, right? But then people go up and they're like, we're so small, we're so insignificant. This thing's much bigger than we could have imagined.
Yeah. You look at the universe, as far as they know, as far as the World Head telescope is saying, you're talking almost 8 billion years as far as what telescope can see. But what's beyond that? The universe is so immense, that.
Well, he's an infinite creator. He keeps creating. He didn't stop.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what he does. And so it goes beyond our can't even.
Yeah, I think the Alpha, Omega, beginning and the end is a reference to the idea that it's limitless.
Yeah.
Right. And I don't know how to define the bubble we live in the world of space or whatever, but whatever you want to define it as, there is no end to it because it is a creation.
God could do whatever he wants to do. It doesn't have to make sense to us, but he does give us time. I've heard, as we spoke last time, so that everything doesn't happen all at once. We order our lives in a sequence. We live on a timeline. God doesn't live on a timeline. That's why Psalm 139 says, every day of your life was written in this book before even one of them came to be.
Well, my timeline, I came in early.
Yeah.
Some people's timeline, they came on time. You came in fairly late, so we're all on different timelines.
Yeah.
You mean someone?
Yeah.
But I'm honored that you guys would choose to spend this time when you have a choice and you decided to be here and to have this important discussion.
My
Dave time.
chapter was when he's explaining God is, and that God isn't more or less whether he creates or doesn't create something. Like God didn't become more when he created man, and he wouldn't be less if man was never created. He is complete and full in the Trinity of itself. There is no adding to or taking away. It is perfectly complete.
Yes.
And to think about that as a statement of, oh, why did God create man? Well, he needed someone to love. Yeah, no, right? Like there's a million discussions on why he created man, but I like the statement in the book where he says, nothing can be added and nothing can be taken away from God because God is. And that's a powerful.
Great I am.
It's a
I am that I am.
But we tend to apply the value by what's new or what's interesting today, right? Well, the only way to define God is where will technology end up? Well, no, technology doesn't exist so that God can be whole.
Yeah.
Technology exists because God allows it, but not because he needs it. I like that part of that chapter.
Yeah.
Definitely the all the wonderful things that we've had in technology. I mean, think about medical advancements in the last 100 years, last 10, and all it looks great. It's kind of like, oh, what we're doing. I laugh at it.
Yeah.
As a Christian, I'm kind of like, that's great. What folly do I want to follow?
Right.
This is here because of him. Not me. I found it. Ooh, that's great. So why, the pronouncement of we are doing these things, I'm thinking.
Yeah. Get your own bird.
Yeah. It's like, here, I'm letting you work with, I'm letting you play in my sandbox.
Exactly. Which is the metaphor they used in this chapter.
Yeah.
Also, the 55-gallon barrel full of Legos. That's another metaphor in this chapter. The Legos, we look at the Legos and go, wow, we can make anything with this. And we dig into the Legos, and yes, there are millions of combinations and things that we can do with these Legos. And we think we're creating, a Tower of Babel, whatever it might be with these Legos. Yeah, the unsinkable ship, right? No, bad idea.
Sink the ship.
They just came out with a recent theory that the Titanic was not sunk by an iceberg.
Oh.
I'm reading about that. It's, oh boy, here we go again.
There's still something.
Yeah.
It's at the bottom of the ocean. We're pretty sure of that.
Really not unthinkable.
Yeah, that's for sure. But the notion that to us as finite beings, we have infinite combinations and we've creativity and we can play, but it's within the 55-gallon drum that we're playing, or the resources provided there that yeah, you can do whatever you want, but it is bounded. It is not infinite to a infinite being, God. It's here's what I'm giving you to work with. Knock your heart out. When Lynn and I were just before we had Julia, we got turned on to Growing Kids God's Way, Gary and Anna Marie Ezzo. And it was a biblically based sort of a guide and they had when you were expecting your firstborn and then toddlers and then on through adolescence, how to raise your kids. And it was very helpful. But one of the things they talked about was a playpen, putting your babies in a playpen. And that was really important to constrain their space and the things that you would add in there that they would discover. And in other words, it was the constraints put on them by being in a playpen led to creativity and discovery that they wouldn't have. It was like, man, this room, I can go anywhere in this room and look at anything, instead of like, I got this space and this is my domain right now, and I'm going to see what I can do with what I have here, Yeah. That's why Leland's such a genius.
I think another important point he made here, number 8, technology is remain under the futility of the curse. So technology can be used for evil as well as for good. And I guess, and talk about thistles and stuff like that. I just relate AI, which since the topic is AI, I'm thinking about the auto industry. AI right now is the Wild West. There's no constraints on it. And I was watching a documentary about the auto industry when it first started out. There were no traffic lights, no stop signs, no driver's licenses. It was really chaotic when the auto industry started out, and kids were driving and they're having a lot of crashes, or auto races, no helmets, and it's just wild. And
Yeah.
all kinds of people didn't know they're driving on the left, right, and just wild. And AI is in that time situation right now, and no rules.
We need to understand, like he just spoke at Stanford on data center sustainability, because with this new technology, we are going to need a lot more compute power. We're going to need a lot more cooling power. We're going to need a lot of water to cool. So we have to think through that whole thing. So back to, our job is to understand these technologies, to govern these technologies, to put the stop signs and the driver's license in place so that we can govern these things and say, rather than like this BZA, I don't know much about that. It sounds like this little rogue group that has a lot more power to make things happen, which is potentially dangerous.
Yes.
Now, the variables of what you're talking about right there, to power up all the units of deep water, to cool everything down. But what happens if we have a drought here? What happens if the water table drops to a certain point to where you can't pull this water in to cool all this equipment? Did they think about that? And one more thing too, I don't see any gigantic retention ponds or lakes to draw the water from, just in case, there would be a shortage because of drought. That might last maybe a whole summer or 2 summers, or maybe
There's some big lakes just a couple of miles up the road.
But who's gonna pay for it? Who's gonna pay for the extra water use with that stuff? Where'd that come from? Right.
Yeah. So the idea of the Wild West and the unchecked AI world, as soon as you talked about it, it immediately reminds me that humanity started with unchecked, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
God said, do and don't.
Yeah.
And we walked right over that line
Right.
immediately.
Right.
And then he came along with these 10 commandments and said, all right, here's the best practices to stay in line. And we all walked right past them, right? I think the expectation that in the youth of what we understand as AI, that we're not going to step over every line that gets drawn in the sand, I think is unrealistic, because the Bible teaches us that that's what we do.
Yeah.
When progress forces us to say, we need to think about this.
It does.
Where do we get more power? Should we do more solar? Should we do wind? Like, what are good as nuclear viable options? Right. So progress actually forces us to be creative.
Well, become a nation of laws. So become a nation of laws so that humanity can survive together.
Right.
Is the equivalent of what we're talking about here, right? You have to evolve whatever it is that you're trying to control in order for it to exist. And if we didn't become a nation of laws, what would we have? We would have unchecked interaction with each other, right? And so I agree, all of it, but it's not new. So,
well, the thing about with AI, you're going to have a creation of more new laws. But when you have more laws, what do you end up losing? Freedom.
We'll see, right? I'm trying to make the equation that humanity has been the first version of AI.
Right.
And we stepped over every line that God drew in the sand and said, don't do it.
Yeah.
And we've learned and survived along the way. I suppose we'll see how this experiment.
Yeah, when Cain killed Abel, there was no law against murder. So that came happened.
So, and that's a great point, because AI is out of back, right? So it's not going back.
No.
So now we have to learn to live and govern it, right? Because it does require all sorts of things. Who's going to pay for the extra water? All of us at some level, and electricity costs will go up, water costs, but there's a benefit also. Right? New jobs. So there's cause and effect. There's pros and there's cons. So I say, we'll get involved in that issue.
Yeah.
Right. Like, I think Google's doing a thing at the Innovation Center in a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
About, hey, become aware of what we're doing. Right. So you have to get plugged in.